Hello and welcome to another Daily Muppet. In today's video, we're going to talk about the delays to the announcement. To be specific, delays to the announcement of the Sir Jim Ratcliffe 25% purchase of Manchester United. Talk about some of the reasons why. Talk about January plans, training, injuries, and the rest. So let's get into it. All right, so obviously the first part of this is talking about the delay in this partial but potentially eventual full takeover of Manchester United by Jim Ratcliffe. To be quite clear, for the most part, this is simply a delay in the timing of when this deal can be officially announced and put forward. 2 weeks ago, they wanted to get it done during the international break. That was the intention. They've been working towards getting it done during the international break. It does not look like it'll be done or announced during the international break, but we did get, of course, the change in Richard Arnold from CEO. And a lot of things are in the works that we'll talk about in a minute, but as I tweeted out this morning, there's nothing wrong with the deal itself, as been indicated to me. It's just really the boring stuff. The legal aspects to this, the details of the paperwork, the writing of bylaws, the clauses, all the things that are put in place in order for this deal to get done, which is rather complex, obviously added to the fact that the club itself is listed on the New York Stock Exchange, means that you cannot really get anything formal or official like you might have with Chelsea, where a lot of stuff was said and formalized before it was actually done, so you kind of knew exactly what was happening. That really can't happen with this deal, and so it gives an apparency of course, this big gap where it's like, some people will still use this kind of these small delays in some of the technical stuff in order to try and drive doubt on the deal. There is none. As far as I understand it, everybody concerned in terms of the major parties of Sir Jim Ratcliffe, Ineos, and the Glazers have all agreed to everything that they're going to need to agree to. There is nothing really left to negotiate. That stuff is all settled, as I understand it, to the point where Jim will be, probably not the only one, heading off on vacation for a little while, heading off on holiday for a little while. So nothing really to worry about there. It's just the boring stuff that takes time in terms of making an announcement. And part of that is... what I would just say is I wouldn't worry about it. I wouldn't worry if it doesn't come next week. I wouldn't worry if it doesn't come the following week. The announcement itself, from what I hear, which is good news, because I've been waiting to get a little bit of clarity on whether this would happen. But alongside the formalizing the deal, as I understand, there will be some statements, and it will be discussed and have to be put forth details about a potential pathway to ownership in the future. So I don't know what those details are, but given that it's said to me that there will be details about that, then I imagine that will be that there is a pathway to ownership of some sort that will be announced or will be discussed and put forward as a part of this deal once it is announced. Just kind of reading between the lines, when I'm told that it's going to be a part of some of what comes out as part of the official announcement. There'll be some statements. There'll be probably a lot of stuff that actually comes forward in terms of short and long-term details, plans, etc. when this is announced. And some of that is supposedly to include details on a path to majority, which I think means that there will be one. Just reading between the lines on all of that. So that's important, but those are also the things that, of course, need detailing, because that itself has its own legal implications to future buying of shares, how that affects the Class A owners, all of that. There's a lot of legal, I'm sure, that goes into that. During the kind of delay, the prior delays, or what was seen as a delay, there had been agreement on that initial purchase, but they were working on, as I mentioned before, the future, the long-term plans, all of that. That is all, as I understand, settled and agreed, and has been, and it's about how you structure all of this legally to make it work in terms of control, in terms of all of it. How is it all legally set up so it makes sense to everybody while also fulfilling the things I've talked about, like fiduciary duty, everything. This is a complicated process, and from the outside it can seem extremely complicated. These are the types of deals that, Jim Ratcliffe tends to get done, and thankfully so, because getting through these complications is definitely, a big part of why there's even a chance at this kind of deal happening right now. So nothing to worry about, not a problem at all. Announcement will come, and the good news is we should get a lot of detail and information when it does come, as far as I understand. And so that is a good sign. Now, let's talk about Director of Football and January. I need to make this clear as well. I retweeted and said, last week that I had this 4-minute segment where I talked about the director. John Murtaugh is obviously still there as the Director of Football. Unlike Richard Arnold, there was no real reason for him to need to be gone during the transition phase. He will remain in his role working as director in the meantime, and I don't see any reason why he shouldn't. So that is what he's doing. Once this deal is finished, once it's complete, obviously there will be, and to add to one other thing, there's obviously going to be a length of time from the deal being finished to the directors, owners, and directors tests and Ineos coming in. I don't think it's going to be as much as 6 to 8 weeks. I think it's going to be a little shorter. I believe there are some things that have already been done on that. So hopefully that reduces the runway and it doesn't make a huge impact. But once Ineos are all the way in, they're going to be analyzing and working on the different departments and things like that in terms of what needs improvement and where change is needed. There will be people that are probably going to leave. There will be people who their roles and what they do will be assessed and maybe moved, where their information, their knowledge, their application is probably valuable to the club as a whole. And Murtaugh could well, as I mentioned before, be one of those people that is moved to a different position or role. But there's some patience that's needed in terms of these overall personnel changes, as they do take time. And when you look at the situation as a whole, I believe, as Ineos really do understand, having looked at the way that transfers, the recruitment are done, that all of that has happened, they do understand it in a similar way that I understand it. And as I've said for quite some time, I don't really place a lot of the blame at the door of the director of football in terms of how recruitment is done, because there's been so much restriction, because there's been so much overstepping by people like Joel Glazer and his advisors and things like that in the area, that it's very hard to judge what kind of job someone like, Murtaugh might be doing. So yeah, I would give that some time to sort of see what happens there, before you think that any kind of, decision will be made on that. And then when it comes all the way up to, to January, then I don't think there's going to be, for similar reasons, essentially, I don't think there's going to be anything major going on there. As I hear it, there's reasons why they're likely to not pursue or get big things done in January. Um, for some reasons that I can't get into now, and for other basic reasons such as FFP and things like that. So I don't expect that we're going to see huge changes in January. A lot of these assessments are already being done, but a lot of them will continue getting the right people in. But then there's going to be long-term decisions that are made over a lot of futures that are more likely to be relevant come summer, and that will be a more appropriate time for, big steps to be made in recruitment and things like that. They will be looking to resolve major situations such as Sancho, if there continues to be any situations with Casemiro and Varane, and starting to try and clear players out, because that has immediate and long-term benefits. Players like Donny van de Beek, in particular, who are really just pointlessly hanging around at the club right now, holding on FFP and with wages and things like that, and not doing really anything. So those are players that they will look at shifting and moving, and you probably see some attempts to do so in January. That's not to say they won't do any business in January, but it is complicated, and I wouldn't expect anything too significant overall, or a lot of spending or some major overhaul, as it's being looked towards summer, and they want to have a full plan aligned in alignment with this whole concept of director of football. What's the way we're going? What's the way we're playing? Or how are things organized and set up with the manager? And then how are we going to recruit in alignment to that? And the names and targets are very likely to change. Moving on to one point, and these next 2 points. The little yellow thing is not big enough for this one. These next 2 points are things that are definitely issues that will need to be resolved. Obviously, there was an article that came out yesterday. There's been a few that have mentioned this, but there's an article that came out that talked about the injuries and the injuries and training and being overworked. And it's really easy to take this and say, we're going to just say it's just players complaining and blah, 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 and all of that. It's really easy to do that and to just make it about that. But that's really not the situation. Obviously, I've been talking about this for some time. There's a difference in the way that United train versus many other clubs. And it's established by people who are not players, but who are other independent parties, observers, things like that, in addition to players, and not players that you're thinking of. And it's not laziness or anything like that, that the way United have been training has been problematic. Now, I said this back in September. At that point, we had, I think, 6 injuries. I've repeatedly said this. I've tried to make warnings. I've tried to inform people that hopefully, hey, listen, there is something wrong here, and there are people who are much more intelligent than I that know something is wrong. And now we're up to 20, maybe more, with Højlund and Eriksen. There's a problem, and it's a matter of a lot of factors coming together that makes this complicated. There's the intensity of the training, which has been extremely high since preseason. When you add to that the amount of games that United have played, which I believe is more than anyone over the last 3 years, the style of play that requires this high transition running up and down the pitch, something has to give. And it's too much for a lot of players, and so it's resulting in injuries. And it's something that is known. I don't know what else to say about it. It's not about laziness. It's not about the players not wanting to work. It's not about them trying to leak and throw the manager under the bus or anything like that, because frankly, that's not how it's gone at all. And it's not about them complaining or not wanting to do the work. It's simply confusing why it's not identified, because when it starts piling up, we have 20 injuries. And some of the only players who haven't been injured are Bruno Fernandes, who never gets injured, and Marcus Rashford, who's maybe one of the fittest players on the planet, and yet people constantly accuse him of being lazy while he runs up and down the pitch and has played as well in the top 10 for minutes over the last 3 years, but maybe is just understanding his body enough to not get injured. It's an issue, and this is an area that I believe is being observed to be problematic and one that will need to be resolved. And I think it is the biggest issue that is throwing a wrench in anything that Erik ten Hag wants to do. Erik ten Hag's position itself under Ineos is at the moment safe. They're not looking to change managers right now, but they do need to see an improvement in results over the course of the season, and they will take long-term decisions come summer with regards to his future. If things go bad over December, if more injuries pile up, get dumped out of the Champions League and fall off the pace in the league, then that would change things. But as of now, that's just ordinary. You have to perform, and nobody is safe if you're starting to lose a bunch of games at Manchester United. So this, I don't know what else to say about this. I continuously brought it up because I know it to be true, and I don't know why it is not seemingly being addressed. This number of non-contact muscle injuries is not normal. And I said even at Wolves, even outside of the injury with Wolves, when I did the first kind of podcast with Phil about it, I said it's not that they don't look fit, they look tired. And the wording in the article was they started this campaign as exhausted as they were by the end of the last one. And that is a problem. They're tired. And there is a level of tiredness and just a simple freshness that's needed. Anyway, hopefully we see some change in this. It might resolve itself if we end up out of the Champions League as well as out of the League Cup. The schedule will be lighter in the second half of the season, so it maybe resolves itself a little bit there, but that's not how it should be. We shouldn't only be suddenly not overworked because we're falling out of all competitions. So I think that's an area that will see huge improvement as well under Ineos, and something that they're going to look to potentially have an effect on this season. And the final thing is communication. One of, as we kind of mentioned in his video earlier in the week, that there was a lot of focus on the different areas and assessments of the different areas of the club and what's working and what's not and what's wrong. And there's a lot of things that are viewed as incorrect or not up to the standard that is necessary. In terms of on the pitch and on the training ground itself, one of those factors is communication. This is an area that has to be improved. This is an area that is felt that is poor, and this is felt that it's certainly from a lot of angles, from a lot of different parties. There is a lack of understanding between Erik ten Hag and getting through to the players. There's a lack of understanding from them of what is exactly wanted. And there's a lack of understanding as to big pictures and things like that. And it's an area that needs improvement. This is one area that I know that has been looked at and said, hey, this is based on information that's come from people around it and based on observation that Ineos will look at and say, something's missing here in terms of how getting everybody on the same page. Because oftentimes they look like strangers walking on the pitch, and and sometimes it is like that in terms of how they deal with things and how it is within the dressing room and how it is between the team and the coaches and all of that. And that is something that needs improvement. I think that the injuries, the fitness, and the communications are two areas where Ineos, when they do get in, can make a big difference pretty quickly and start to really work on. Recruitment, direction, sporting style, all of that, that's going to take time and some patience will be needed. But I do hope they get in there soon, because I think these are areas that can be resolved that would result in, less injuries, better cohesion between players and the manager and all of that. And hopefully then we could actually see what Eric Ten Hag is trying to do and then be able to make better judgments as to, what the results may be, and instead of just trying to blame everybody on all parts around all of this. So that's what I have for today. Hopefully some of this was informative and interesting. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on, and I'll see you in the next one.